People with mental illness are usually the last person to know that they have it. It's usually like the development within their family that realizes something's going on. And that was very much true in my case. When my biological father, who was kind of estranged from our lives, had it, and he was very chaotic in my early development. He finally left our lives when I was like 13, but they got divorced when I was 6. So my mom was familiar with the warning signs because she saw it develop in him. I was a straight A student, top of my class, played sports, like was in acting and politics, and then around 12 or 13, things started slipping. My interest in school started decreasing, and then my interest in friends started decreasing, and all of a sudden, by the time I was 15, I was in a lot of legal problems, a lot of chaos, doing all kinds of things. Around 14 is when my mother started petitioning the psychiatrist to diagnose me. When I was 15, I landed up in Shoal Creek. They finally said, okay, this is what's going on. We're not going to sugarcoat it anymore. And it was very unusual for someone my age to be diagnosed, especially then, and it's still kind of unusual now. It planted the seed of, me really wanting to get involved in doing something. Depression Chronicles, Normal Like Us came up, and I was like, yeah, I can, use my voice. And then I realized that I have a strong voice, and that people could actually benefit from some of the things that I say. So the combination of just like the right circumstances and events that unfolded, I want to help people before they get to that point. And I want to help people be able to talk about things that we're not supposed to talk about, because we should be able to talk about them. And this kid that just had intensity that I can relate to all too well overtook him. It's sad that it happens like that. There's thousands and hundreds of thousands of untold stories like this. Debunk a lot of the myths that were associated with somebody who commits suicide. One of the things even I wasn't aware of is when they actually do it, it's very logical in their minds, and he actually typed out a pros and cons list versus life versus death. They were interviewing a psychiatrist after, and he said, yeah, more often than not, it's not like this long, passionate letter that Hollywood makes you think it is. Very logical approach saying, these are the reasons why I can't do this anymore. Anybody with a mental illness has had the thought of suicide, whether they want to admit it or not. It's definitely been there. I think it's a consequence that doesn't have to materialize in people, and I think largely if we had more of an open dialogue, people could come out and say, hey, you know what, I'm feeling this way, I need help, instead of I'm feeling this way, I'm going to keep it to myself, bottle it all in, and then a drastic thing happens. I didn't really understand the impact of it originally, and then I didn't really embrace it for a long time. The treatment methods weren't as good as they are now. It was basically give you drugs, go to some introspective therapy, and then kind of be on your way. And now they developed this new therapy called dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT for short, that's really beneficial for people with my condition. At the time, I wasn't aware of it. I didn't really commit to becoming better. I just kind of committed to not dealing with it, and I successfully as I can do that, I managed to just emotionally shut off from everybody for a long time, and which caused, saved me from having these drastic reactions to emotions. So
it was almost like, just cutting yourself off from everybody so that you wouldn't have those swings about that kind of thing.
Yeah, I could socially interact with people, but it was always detached. It was charming, it was insightful, so people didn't really realize how cut off I was, but they didn't know much about me, and I knew a lot about them. So close to home on so many different levels, and especially inspired me to go through and really commit to doing the things that I'm doing with mental health issues. The true answer to health is sparking a conversation about it and really getting involved and helping people not feel shame and guilt for dealing with it. And we're already prone to isolate, and you give us more of a reason to isolate, then just drastic things are going to happen that are unnecessary. People with mental illness, you can't really argue that we have a tendency to be way above average in intelligence. Our creativity is usually much more advanced than other people. Our love for life, even our hate for life, both the extremes in that is really there. It's unfortunate that these qualities are often overlooked, often forgotten about. And so when I did the play, I was like, okay, I want to be honest about my struggles, about coming to terms with this, but I also want to remind people of the great things we're capable of too. Like from the beginning, it all started with Depression Chronicles, and portions of the monologue that I put into the play were directly from the Depression Chronicles monologue that I wrote. The process, I wrote a 9-page script, I workshopped it some, and then I expanded it, and workshopped it and expanded it, and I could no longer trust my own judgment about it, because I read it one day, I was like, oh, this is the best thing ever, and I read it the next day, oh, this is crap, and then on top of that, everything was very personal to me, so it was also emotionally triggering. Some of the scenes I couldn't even watch during rehearsal because they were so emotionally triggering, and then the fear and the anxiety that this is all on me, and it was a very, very stressful time, but I'm glad I did it, because on the last night, some people who from a support group that I was unfamiliar with were there, and they really affected them in a positive way.
Okay. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what was the scariest part of turning it into something that you were going to put in front of all these people?
I don't know. I mean, you would think that it's sharing my whole story, but my story is my story, and everything that happened in my life is developed into what defines me as a person now. I think the scariest part was that I wouldn't do justice for the community that needs it the most, and I really wanted to make sure that it was represented in a fair, honest way, but also with a positive element to it that a lot of times isn't discussed, because we hardly ever talk about the amazing qualities that people with mental illness generally have, and I think that that's a shame. And I think if we do, and we start showing the world the better half of us, then we have a real option of our opportunity to take away a lot of the stigma associated with it, so people don't have to spend 20 plus years suffering from illness, when there's pretty good methods for treatment.
First of all, I want to thank you for doing this. This is amazing. I actually helped lead a bipolar support group, so I might want to talk to you afterwards.
Okay.
But I want to ask, how therapeutic was doing this for you? Or was it therapeutic for you doing this?
To be determined.
It's a leading question there. Okay.
Yes, there was definitely a cathartic release in the process. But the stress and anxiety and just the level of energy that it takes to put on a production like this was very demanding of me. And so, I think at this point, now that it's done and we're final, very therapeutic. But the process, not so therapeutic. Everyone experiences what somebody with a mental illness experiences, it's just the degree that they experience it on.